Ну что ж, добрый день, уважаемые участники мастер-класса. Меня зовут Адриан, я менеджер приемной комиссии школы кино и телевидения «Индустрия». Ну что ж, мы сегодня продолжаем нашу серию мастер-классов, которые у нас проходят по пятницам от школы кино, естественно, с зарубежными кинематографистами, профессорами и представителями топовых мировых киношкол. Вот, немножечко расскажу про нашу школу кино и телевидения «Индустрия». Значит, ее основали режиссер Федор Бондарчук и продюсеры кинокомпании «Водород» — это Михаил Врубель и Александр Андрющенко. Также партнером проекта является Национальная медиагрупп. Вот, какое главное отличие нашей школы? Значит, наша школа — это уникальная для России система обучения. Лучшие профессионалы области на практике делятся с студентами своими знаниями, опытом, который они получают со своей профессии, естественно. И после окончания курсов выпускников ждет обширная программа стажировок. То есть дальше можно будет работать, получить шансы работать в киноиндустрии. Вот, у нас сейчас уже идет набор научной программы, а это менеджмент в музыкальном бизнесе, маркетинг оригинального контента, второй режиссер, VFX, композитинг артист и 3D-артист, звукорежиссура и режиссура монтажа. Вот, у нас не только есть очные программы, но у нас также есть онлайн-программы, так что студенты, которые проживают не в Москве, также могут у нас обучаться. Вот, на онлайн-программу также у нас идет набор, а это продюсирование, режиссура, сценарное мастерство, режиссура монтажа, VFX и filmmaking. Вот. Но возвращаемся к нашим мастер-классам. Значит, мастер-классы будут проходить регулярно, уже запинаюсь, вечер, извините. Проходить регулярно в ближайшие месяцы каждую пятницу вечером, как, собственно, сегодня. Так что следите за нашим расписанием на сайте, регистрируйтесь и посещайте наши вебинары. Вот. Сегодня у нас о дебюте режиссера в большом кино расскажет Шон Муллин. Он сценарист, режиссер, преподаватель Американского института искусства. Вот. Его режиссерским дебютом стал фильм «Амира и Сэм». Вот. Позже кинокартину назвали одним из лучших роликов десятилетия. Вот. Что касается сегодняшнего мастер-класса, значит, сегодня наш мастер-класс будет проходить около 1,5 часа, а это 1:15 у нас будет непосредственно мастер-класс и 15 минут серия вопросов и ответов, где вы можете, собственно, задать их. И с подарком от школы в конце мероприятия, так что очень хороший бонус. Вот. Поэтому предлагаем вам оставаться до конца, естественно, задавать вопросы в момент, пока идет вебинар, мастер-класс. И Шон на них, естественно, ответит, на самые интересные он ответит с большим удовольствием. Так что пишите, задавайте вопросы. И также вы можете задавать вопросы непосредственно про нашу школу, про наши программы. Вот поэтому ждем, ответим с радостью. Так что вот, надеюсь, вам это понравится. Вот. Так что всем большое спасибо, что вы уже присоединились. Я передаю слово Шону.
Okay. Well, thank you. I didn't understand a word of that, but it sounded amazing. So I trust that it was great. Thank you. We're going to talk today. I've been a professor for a while here in Los Angeles. I currently teach at the American Film Institute, AFI, and I teach a lot of different courses. I've taught producing, writing, and directing, but the course we're going to talk about today is about how to make your first feature film, because I've found when I've taught students who are coming out of film school, a lot of them will have short films, really great short films, but it's making that leap from the short to the feature that can take years, or sometimes it never happens. Sometimes they just never get the film off the ground. And so I created a course. It's a semester-long course I teach on how to get your first feature film off the ground. And so I'm going to try to teach an entire semester here in an hour. So wish me luck on that. So I'm going to jump right into it. And then we'll have a Q&A after, I understand, which is great. So I'm going to share a document with you. I believe you will all be getting copies of these documents at the end of the lecture, but I'm going to start with the first one. this is this master class, and this is what I want to teach you. And so these are the topics we're going to touch on in this hour. Um, it's really, this class is designed how to create the elements you need. You in order to make your first feature film, you need a certain, you need a certain amount of things, right? And so what we're going to go over and we're going to talk about is, you know, um, talk about, is your screenplay, is the idea you have worthy of a film? I think that's a big problem a lot of early filmmakers have, is they just have an idea and they think, oh, I have an idea, that's a movie. Well, just because you have an idea does not mean it's a movie. And so you need to be really hard on yourself. You need to really try to um, uh, uh, make sure that the idea you have is as strong as possible. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then once you do have a screenplay, you don't just want to send out the first thing you wrote. You want to make sure you revise it and you polish it and you get it to the point where it's in really good shape. And then we're going to talk about how to create an estimated budget, just very loosely, kind of how budgeting and how that plays a role. And then I'm going to show, as an example, the film my first feature film. We shot it in the summer of 2013, so it's been a while now. And then we did festivals in 2014. We won about 10 film festivals, which was wonderful in 2014. And then it was released, a small limited theatrical release in the United States in 2015. It was called Amira and Sam. And so we're going to use that film as a case study. And I'm going to give you guys a bunch of materials from that film. I'm going to give you guys my budget. I'm going to give you guys my financing proposal. I'm going to give you all of that stuff. So hopefully it can help you all. And then we'll talk about other pitch decks and other auxiliary materials, ancillary extra materials, supporting materials, I guess you'd call it, that can help you with your pitch. And then, there's also a list. I'm actually going to start with this list of, I'm going to pass along a list of first feature films that you should all, I think it's very important for those of you, and I don't know what percentage are, directors or producers or writers or what, your specialty is, but I don't think it really matters. I think whatever you want to do, you should become very aware in the history of first feature films, because it's how people broke into the industry, because it's such a hard barrier to get across. And so we'll talk about some of the more famous kind of first features. Also, I've listed a bunch of textbooks here. These are a bunch of books that I recommend. You can get whatever you feel you like. I recommend them all, obviously. This first one is a producing book. It's really, really good, just step by step, very pragmatic way of how you make a movie. I like it a lot. It's a really good producing manual. And Maureen was actually one of my mentors in grad school. I got my master's degree in New York City at Columbia University. And so that's how that book came to be. Rebel Without a Crew is a book about El Mariachi, which was Robert Rodriguez's first feature film, and I really recommend that a lot. It's a really great. He made that movie for nothing. He actually, part of his story is pretty famous. He would go to blood clinics to donate blood to get little bits of money to make that movie. So he literally put his blood, sweat, and tears into that film. It's a great story. Christine Vachon is one of the great producers in American cinema. She wrote a really wonderful book. Ted Hope's a great producer. As for you directors out there, this is Sidney Lumet's an incredible director. This book is really, really great. I read it before every time I make a new film. I'm directing a documentary right now, and I'm getting ready to direct my second feature film, hopefully this summer. So I've been rereading all this stuff as well. Poetics goes all the way back to the Aristotle. And then a great screenwriting book. This is my favorite screenwriting book. I think it's the best one out there. And we can talk a little bit about this idea of approaching a screenplay. Basically the thesis behind this book is, instead of looking at a screenplay as 100 or 120 pages of just blank white space and being so intimidating, this breaks a feature film down into sequences, into 10 to 15 page short films, essentially. So instead of looking at like let's say 100 page script and you don't know where to start, you just you write 8 short films and you kind of piece them together. And to me, and I don't know how your brain, you all have different process. You all have each of your processes are different. But for me, it's very helpful to look at that and think, okay, I'm going to write, 10 to 15 pages. That's the first sequence. Then 10 to 15, that's the next one. And I write them as if they're like 8 independent short stories. And we'll talk about that as well today. This is also just another good screenwriting book about the endings, about the final act of your movie. I think it's really good. This Hollywood standard is, and again, I don't know, my apologies for not knowing too much about the film industry in Russia. Although I did make one film where I went and we shot I shot a documentary about this beer competition actually and there's a big brewery up in Klin, 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 just north of Moscow. So I was out there once for a film shoot, and but I don't know much about the industry. But in Hollywood and in Los Angeles, this book, The Hollywood Standards, really tells you how to format, the formatting of a screenplay. And again, it's, it might be different, but it's something I teach out here. This is a great book just about how hard it is to be an artist and about staying positive and fighting your way through. It's just more of a motivational book, but I like it a lot. This Bruce Block, this book is really for directors and maybe cinematographers out there. It's about how you create images and deep space and flat space and how you use images to tell your story. And it's really, really great. It's one of the best. And then this last book is just about negotiation. It's about basically the idea that anytime you want to negotiate any sort of deal, you want to have 3 numbers in your head. So like, let's say you want to make your movie for $1 million is in American currency. Let's just say that's your goal, right? You want to, that's the most money you think you could get is $1 million. So you're gonna kind of sort of wish for $1 million, but you can make it for $500,000, 500,000, let's say. So that's your want. You can make it for half that if you had to. And then there's a line where 250,000, let's say a quarter. You can't make the movie for less than that. There has to be a base where you have to walk. Essentially, you have to leave the project because you just can't get it done. And so understanding, and we'll talk about this with budgeting, but understanding budgets are flexible. You're not always going to say, you're not going to write a script and be like, okay, this is the exact amount. It's this dollar. It's this amount exactly of the budget, and that's it. There's going to be some flexibility, and it's going to depend on cast and all this other elements sometimes you can't control. So understanding where you fall on that spectrum of kind of wish, want, walk, and again, those are I don't know how those translate, but they translate really well in English because they're 3 W's. Anyway, so that's that, and then then this is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll keep this up for now, and I'm going to jump right into. I'm not going to take questions now. I'm sorry if I'm talking. Am I talking too fast at all? Am I doing okay? Everything's fine. Okay, great. So let me pull up the next. Let me jump right into this. Let's pull up the next thing. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this list I've put together of, seminal kind of notable first feature films. So this is for you. This is kind of a study guide for you to take with you. And this isn't every film, but these are just kind of notable, I call them notable, or, films by filmmakers that are famous filmmakers or first features that were done well. So I went all the way back to 1914. And so you can look through this. I recommend watching as many of these movies as you can. There's some really, really wonderful ones in here. One of my favorites all time is a Russian. There we go. Tarkovsky, of course. Incredible first feature film. A real accomplishment, a real cinematic achievement. So you can go through this. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because I don't want to waste any time, but I just want to show you that I think there's like 200 or 300 films on here that I've collected. So I'm adding to this all the time. And I apologize. A lot of this is very American centric. I teach at the American Film Institute, so it's a very American list. I've tried to make it as international as I can. Wherever is possible, but it's a very American list. So I won't talk too much about it, but I want to let you know that is there. Okay, so when you're going to make your first film, I think the most important thing to do is you need to ask yourself, is your story cinematic, right? Is the story, cinematic? Is it worthy of of your effort? Because it's going to be a lot of work to make this movie, and some stories, oops, hold on, sorry, there we go. Some stories, are short stories. Some stories are books or novels. Some stories are songs, right? Some stories are jokes, right? So every story has a different medium. Some stories are plays, like a theater, right? Like a play. Not every story is a film, and I think a big problem is I see a lot of first-time filmmakers trying to tell a story that does not deserve a cinematic treatment, if that makes sense. And so before you do anything, I think it's really good to be hard on yourself, to really ask yourself, why, what makes this particular story cinematic? Why does it deserve this? And so in order to do this, you need to define for yourself, you need to define what cinema means. So what does cinema mean to you? It means something different to every director, right? It means it means one thing to Christopher Nolan. It means another thing to Tarantino. It means another thing to all these different Steven Spielberg. Every director has come to the point in their career where they have a firm understanding of what cinema means to them, and that's fine, and it's a unique process. But you need to come up with your definition for yourself, and you need to understand it. So for me, it's kind of in flux. I'm still kind of evolving as a filmmaker myself. But I like to say a story is cinematic if multiple elements within a screenplay afford me the opportunity to manipulate time, space, and/or images to provoke an emotional response from an audience. That's a mouthful. I'm sorry. Hopefully you got all that. But for me, before I undertake a film, I want to I ask myself these questions: is you know uh, you know what's what is it that really makes a film, sets what is it that separates this story apart from uh me telling it as a book or as a story to someone in a room. What you really want to do is you want to leverage the powers that make cinema unique. So in cinema you can jump time, you can jump space, you can manipulate emotions, and I teach a whole directing class, a 15-week directing class, which is all about the manipulation of time, really, and compression. The two biggest words for a director, and this is going into a different lecture, but I feel like I should say it. The two biggest, most important words I feel like for a director are compression and elaboration, right? Compression and elaboration. So really, understanding what it is that you compress and what it is that you elaborate is super, super important. So because that shows your priorities as a storyteller. So if you are, so if something is important on screen, you want to elaborate it. You can elaborate it by holding on a shot for longer. You can intercut. You can go boom, back, forth, back, forth. You can elaborate that moment, and that means as a storyteller that's an important moment for you. Or you can compress it and cut it out. You can cut. You can cut from one scene. At the end of a scene, you can cut, and it could be 20 years later, right? And so those are cinematic tools. I know some of this might sound obvious and to some of you, but understanding cinema in those terms of compression and elaboration, I think, are very important, and I think it's what gives cinema a lot of its inherent power. And so it's something I think you should um, take in mind. Is that hopefully that makes sense? I'm trying not to move this. Oops, let me see. Okay, let me just. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So let's assume you've got a story. So you've come up with an idea. You think it's cinematic. You write a screenplay. Okay, great. You've written the screenplay. That's fine. You've got, maybe you've written one or two drafts, But now, you know, before you start sending that out to producers or actors or other people, you know, you want to send it out to your kind of circle of close, hopefully friends, or maybe you have a teacher or somebody who can give you feedback. You know, don't, you know, you can ask your mom, but a lot of times, you know, she'll probably say she loves it, even if it's horrible. So I try to stay away from family. But unless your mom hates you, and that's a whole other story. And then she still might say she likes it. Anyways, but you know, try to go to people who know a little bit about cinema or a little bit about film to read your script, get them to read it a few times. And then before it goes out into the world, you want to polish it, okay? And this is another one of the handouts. You guys will have this handout, so don't worry. But this is what I kind of you know, before I send out a script, you know, this is kind of a manual on how to polish a screenplay. So you'll look at it, you know, does it? And again, I'm talking in very broad kind of you know, classic kind of Hollywood terms with 3-act structure. I understand a lot of films sometimes might not have that, and that's totally fine. That's okay. I mean, if what cinema means to you is, you know, a film that's maybe a little less structured or a little more disjointed or something along those lines, that's totally fine. But this is the basics to at least give you a jumping off point to understand what you need to look at. So I usually look at the 3-act structure. You know, are all the acts working together, and then the sequence, like I talked to you about earlier, the sequence analysis. I like to break the script down into sequences again, and a sequence is defined as, you know, 10 to 15 pages of a script, which, you know, equals approximately 10 to 15 minutes on screen. And if you start watching films, with this idea of the sequence in mind, you'll start noticing more and more that every 10 to 15 minutes, typically something kind of happens, and then it gets propelled to you know, the next level, right? And then so what doing this, breaking your script into sequences, what that will do for you is it will show you where the script is like too fat and where it's too lean, right? So if you break your script into, let's say, 8 sequences, and you'll see one of the sequences is 10 pages and the next one's 12, that's great. And then maybe the next one's like 30 pages. You have like a 30-page sequence. Well, you're probably being redundant. You're probably repeating yourself in that sequence. And so you can look, and maybe you can trim that one down. Maybe you can pull that one down. And so a lot of this whole process, especially this process here, has to do with pacing. You know, pacing your script, how your script reads to a reader, right? And how the information flows. And so and that's my next thing. How is it pacing? You know, does each sequence propel the next sequence? You need to ask yourself, is there some sort of inherent engine running this? Now, you know, there's different types of engines in films, right? There are, if you've got a big action movie and there's a lot of plot, then that's going to kind of drive it. If it's a more of a muted drama, you know, what drives it is going to be a little smaller in scale, and the stakes might be a little different. It's not going to be maybe life and death, but maybe it's something a little maybe less heightened. But that doesn't mean it's less important. Every story, you know, is important if you tell it the right way. Yeah, and I give each little sequence, I give each one a beginning, middle, end. You know, a beginning, middle, end, like a little arc. So I tell them like they're like little. And if this is a screenwriting class, which we don't have time for today, I could get more into that. But I just want to give you the basic. And then after I analyze the 3 acts, I analyze the sequences, and then after that I analyze the scenes. You know, like every single scene in your film. So your film, if you have a 100-page screenplay, and the average scene is usually 2 pages, you know, average 2 pages, 2 minutes each scene. So, you know, you'll have some scenes that are, you know, obviously, you know, maybe 15 seconds, and you'll have some scenes that could be 10 minutes, right? So it depends on the type story, of course. But let's say the average is you've got 50 scenes in a 100-page screenplay. Go through and look at every single one of those scenes, and does every single one work? Is everyone necessary? You know, is there a way to make each one a little bit better? There's a screenwriting rule where, you know, you want to get into every scene as late as possible and leave as early as possible. So you kind of want to, you don't want to usually have a lot of hellos and good, you know, hellos at the beginning and goodbyes at the end. You don't necessarily need that in your scene. So going through and being hard on yourself to really scrutinizing every make sure every scene is impactful as possible. And then after that, I'll do a character pass. I'll look at all the characters, look at all the characters in the movie and take a long, after you've written a script, sometimes this happens to me a lot with my producers I work with, where I'll write a script and the producers will say, hey, can we, it's happened a couple times where, hey, can we combine two characters, or can we get rid of that character? Or, their producers are always trying to, get rid of people because it's more money, right? So and that's fine. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes the screenplay is better if you pare it down a little bit. So but I just take a long look at all the characters. Can I combine them? Is the dialogue, how's the dialogue? Is it authentic and engaging? Are people, do you feel like do the characters have their own unique voice? Do you feel like these are interesting people we've never seen before? And another big thing I tell my first time filmmakers is when you're going out there, you need to be able to prove why now, like why this film now? What is it about this film that demands that it gets made now? And so you need to be able to do that, and so a lot of that tends to be with the characters. So you need to really be hard, just again, be hard on yourself, really go at it. Oftentimes in films, a character will go through a journey or some sort of arc. Not always, but typically they'll go through some sort of transformation. The character on page 1 is not the same character on page 99. And so tracking that arc, does that arc make sense? Is it all just one person the whole time, and at the very end there's a big change? Well, that's a problem, right? I mean, you kind of want to usually have a more of an arc to a character, as opposed to abrupt character changes that aren't grounded in reality or authentic. Then I look at the themes. What are the themes you're trying to get at? And then of course spelling and grammar. This is a big one too. I mean, obviously, if you're writing the screenplay in Russian, I can't help you there. Or, but the I don't know. When people send scripts out, if your screenplay is riddled with a lot of grammatical or spelling errors, at least in America, I know producers will. The immediate thought is, well, if this person doesn't care enough to really clean up and send out a polished, clean, proofread script, then they're not going to be worth working with, if that makes sense. Okay, great. And then aesthetics. This is a strange one, but this is more important than you'd think. And again, I can't speak to if if the screenplay is written in Russian. I'm assuming it's the same thing as if it's written in English. I don't think it's a big difference, but the way the words fall on the page, the way the actual aesthetics of the screenplay are, like, do the words fall on the page in a way that is pleasing? There's, and this is a hard thing to get into without teaching a full class on it. But you can go in and look at ways to just tighten up your descriptions, for example, so you don't have like super long blocks, like 10 lines of description. Can you get that down to 2 or 3 lines? Brevity, keep it quick, keep it concise, keep it moving. This is all very important stuff. And then, and it's obviously important to have a good title and a good log line. I'm going to show you guys this next template. I'm going to show you is a log line template, which is just a way to describe your film. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to pull up this now. So log line, what's a log line? A log line is, a log line is at least is just a 1-sentence explanation of your film. So just so you can kind of sort of tell somebody, what it is. And so this is a template that I've created. So you can do title is a genre about a protagonist who must goal, otherwise stakes. So I don't know. Again, hopefully that translates okay. This is a longer version as well, where you can kind of fill in. So for my film, so for Amira and Sam, is a love story or a romance about it's 2 protagonists. So my film had a dual protagonist. So it's about an army veteran, an Iraqi refugee, who must deal with the fact that Amira is being deported in the context of their relationship. So that's not a very good log line off the top of my head, but that's the idea. And again, the whole point of these templates is not to, this isn't perfect. This is not a perfect, but it's just to get you thinking. So then you can, usually with log lines, I will write 10, 20, sometimes 30 different log lines. I keep changing and switching around words, but this is just to get you moving. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's pretty self-explanatory. So once you so okay, you've got a script, you've got a log line, it's polished, it goes out, and usually the producers are the ones who make the budgets. But I tell my students, the class I teach at AFI is all for directors, and I tell those directors that they have more power as directors if they can create their own budgets, at least to understand the process of budgeting, right? And what it takes to budget a movie. So I'm going to share. I have the budget for Amira and Sam, my film, and so again, this was almost eight years ago. Jeez, I'm getting old. This was a long time ago. But this is the budget I used. The total budget of my movie was US dollars, 338,000 US dollars. So not in the scope of American film or just cinema in general. It's a pretty lower budget film for what we were able to do, for a feature length film. But I'm sharing this with you all. So I'm not going to go through it all now, but just to give you some ideas. I mean, you can go through and how, and again, things are different over here with different unions and different rules and stuff, but it just kind of gets to show you of all the things that you need, all the things that you need to cover. So, I mean, from wardrobe and makeup, and this is hair and makeup, wardrobe, this is what we were able to make the movie for. So I don't know if this is helpful. The problem with independent filmmaking is a lot of times people don't share. They don't share their information. They don't share their budgets. They don't share their stuff. And I want to share. I want this information to get out there and for you to understand what it takes to make a movie. So I would recommend trying to get your hands on other budgets if you can. Again, this is the one I use. I don't even know if Amira and Sam is available for view in Russia. I'm sure it's on some. I'm sure it's out floating around the internet somewhere. But if you want to watch the movie at some point, you can watch it and then look at this budget and kind of sort of see where the money was spent. I mean, this is pretty funny. Contingency is, what you have to left over for security, and usually you want this number to be closer to 5 to 8%, maybe even 10%. But we had so little money, so it was not much money at all. But we made it. We made the movie. I was very proud of it. Again, we won a bunch of film festivals. We sold it, and it played, and it got me over that. It got me over that hump. There's a big hump between being a film student and making short films, which are great. I made 3 short films while I was in graduate school at Columbia in New York, and they all, they did very well. They played at festivals, and they got me some credibility. And then when it came time to make Amira and Sam, when I sent the screenplay out to actors, the actor we ended up getting, he liked it. He read the script. He's like, I really like this. But he asked his agent. He said, what else is this guy directed? What else has Sean directed? And so the agent reached out to me, and so I was able to send the agent a link to I had a 12-minute short film from graduate school, and it was nothing like Amira and Sam. It was like a heavy drama. Amira and Sam is kind of a romance and a love story, and my thesis film from graduate school was a completely different genre, and but didn't matter. The actor watched the short, and he's like, okay, this is a good short. This guy can direct, and he took the meeting with me, and then we met, and then we made the movie. So so I would also, I don't want to, we don't have too much time to get into short films today. That's another class I've taught for years, is how to, make, great short films, because it's so important. I will say a couple things about it now, but typically a really great short film is in that 10 to 15 minute range, sometimes up to 20. Once it starts getting over 20, I've seen some great ones. I've seen some wonderful films that are over 20, but festivals don't like to program them because they're so long, and it starts to get in this weird middle ground of, is it even a short film anymore? Is this trying to do too much? And I think, and this is a very important thing for short films. I think people, I think the least successful, the short films that have the most problems, um, are short films that try to cram an entire feature film, a whole movie, into like 15 or 20 minutes, and it feels, you feel like you're almost watching a trailer or a preview of a feature film um, that doesn't work on its own. And so I highly recommend trying to tell a short story that is a complete narrative and it's on its own. It can stand alone. So that's a big piece of advice I give my students all the time. And as far as short films go, the advice I like to give is, to me, the best short films, and again, this is my own personal opinion, so you might disagree, but to me, the best short films revolve around a moment in someone's life that they're never going to forget. I'll say that one more time. So the best short films revolve around a moment in someone's life that they're never going to forget. And so if you can build up, if you can use the first, 8 to 10 minutes, build up to this moment, and then there's a moment, whether it's a twist or whether it's a reveal or whether it's something, and something happens where it's a real moment where everything leading up to it, kind of I call it the emotional math. The emotional math of that moment is validated. uh, to me, those are the best short films, and the reason why they work really well as short films and translate into your first feature is, if you can if you can use 10 to 15 minutes to craft a real honest, genuine, either funny or scary or dramatic or whatever your genre is. Genre doesn't matter, but if you can use 10 to 15 minutes and craft a real honest moment, just one honest moment that is going to be stuck in the minds of viewers. And if you can create that one moment, then when it comes to a feature film, feature films are really nothing more. Like a 90-minute film is nothing more than uh, you know 3 or 4 moments, really, that you're I mean, that's really what it is. It's everything in that film. There's a great screenwriter named Robert Town. He wrote Chinatown and a bunch of other famous films. He's a famous American screenwriter, and he said, all great movies are nothing more than 3 or 4 moments between two people. Right? And again, you can agree or you can disagree with that. But this idea that so much of cinematic storytelling is about adding up the emotional math until you get to these moments of either down cycles or up cycles, these pivot moments. And so if you can do that in a short, just one moment, then you should be able to replicate that in a feature. So hopefully that is making sense. So hopefully this budget helps you all. Feel free to look at it and go through it. And again, it's from 2013, so it's a little old, and it's US dollars, and it's in New York. So it's not probably how your movies, well, you're definitely not making a movie in 2013 unless you have a time machine, which we should talk. But you know, uh, hopefully it helps. All right, let's move on. So once you've got a budget, you need to raise the money, right? So how do you raise the money? What is it? And that's the big question. And it's tough. And listen, if you come from a family, some people come from families who have family money. And if that's the case, that's great. I mean, use those connections. I did not. I did not come from one of those families, so I had to figure out how to raise the money on my own. And it was just through networking and meeting people and being passionate. And it took me, 7 years, just from the time I got my graduate degree at Columbia in 2006 to shooting my film in 2013. It took me 7 years to get my first feature made. So it took me a very long time. I had produced a feature in the middle. I produced a feature called Allegiance for a friend of mine, Michael Connors, who we went to graduate school together. So that helped a lot. Producing a feature helped. But as far as a writer director, it took me 7 years. And so when I raised the money, here's the document. I'm going to share this document with you as well. You'll all get a copy of this. And again, it might, the title changed, by the way. The title used to be Sam and Amira. And then when my distributors bought it, they flipped it to Amira and Sam. So that's not a big deal. but you know, and again, this might be completely different in Russia. So you know, you know, I don't know what to tell you. I just all I know is what I've been able to do. But hopefully you can pull something from this for your own. So I'm not going to go through it line by line, but I will kind of go through it a little bit. Hold on a second. Hold on one second. Let me. Oops, what's going on? Content for reading. Okay, great. So let's see if we can. So there's a table of contents. You know, this is just an overview of everything we use to pitch. I mean, this is real quick. This is the official document I use to pitch the movie and raise the money. So on page one, this is just like an overview. Here's my log line, right? So remember we talked about log lines, right? So this is, you know, title is a genre about all this stuff. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Sam and Amira is a love story between a charismatic army veteran and a vibrant Iraqi immigrant whose whirlwind love affair is put to the test when Amira is faced with deportation. You know, so that's the movie. That's the gist. It's important to get that out so people know what they're doing. This is a little bit about my background. And then just we had a big casting director. This was really nice. I was able through a guy I had done some work for. I was able to get a big casting director. He had done a bunch of very well-known movies, at least in America. He was a big casting director, so got him on board. I got a friend of mine from film school. This is also an important thing for all of you in film school. Stay close friends with your classmates. One of my friends from graduate school, his name is James Ponsolt. James like took off after film school, and he had his first 4 feature films all premiered and sold at Sundance Film Festival here in America, which is a big festival. And he took off. So I approached him. He was doing so well, and we were very close friends. And I approached him to become an executive producer on my film. So he came on. So James came on board as an executive producer. He didn't bring any money. He didn't have any money to give. He wasn't doing that well, but he he lent his credibility, he lent his clout to the project, if that makes sense, because he was repped at one of the big agencies. That is another very American thing, but there are these massive talent agencies. They're the big 4 talent agencies in Hollywood are CAA, UTA, ICM, and WME. They all go by these 3-letter initials. And anyways, like 90% of the film business goes through those 4 agencies. And so he was at one of the big agencies, UTA, which is where I'm repped now. But I was at the time I did not have agents, and so but he was there, and he came on board, and so that was a big help. It gave between James Ponsolt coming on board and then Billy Hopkins, this kind of famous casting director, just by having those 2 pieces was enough to like, you know, the key thing is you want to make people think that this is like a real project, that this is you know, it's not I don't know how do I say this, a piece of crap, piece of shit, right? Like you want to make, I don't know, is that proper? You know, you want to make you want people to believe that this is a good project, that these are real people who have had some achievements in the industry, and they're lending their time or effort or services or clout, they're lending that to you, and that really helped. And then we were looking to raise $300,000 in US dollars. We were taking them in units as small as $10,000 chunks. So, you know, I was able to find two investors to put in 100,000 each. That was those were my big scores. So that was 200. And then the last 100, I just like, man, I don't know where I found it. I just scrounged and found friends and friends of friends, and was able to put it together. It was very stressful. I was raising the money all the way up through production, through prep. I was still raising money. It was very stressful and horrible, but that's independent filmmaking, and I still love it. Okay, so let's go to the next thing here. Oops, why is it not moving? Oops. Oh, so this is just a story. I'm sorry. This is just a synopsis. This is just the story. Just 2 pages. Like it's basically the screenplay, the entire 90-page screenplay down to 2 pages. Just so you know that. Then this is me. This is my background. Just a little bit about me. Then my statement about like why am I making this movie? Why are you as the director telling this story? Why should people give up an hour and a half of their life to this. I mean, that's really what you're asking people to do, right? You're asking people to give up a big chunk of their life for you, which is it's a pretty bold uh, ask of you to ask somebody to give up an hour and a half. So you need to be able to justify it. So I had a whole statement of why I was a veteran. I had been in the military, so I had some military ties to the story as well. This is our, and then I got into our, again, if you've got any element attached to your project who has any kind of credibility, like lean on them as much as possible. So I had this really great casting director out of New York. He had done all these big movies, which were big, again, big over here in America, at least. And so just, I wanted to put these so investors could be looking at this, be like, oh, okay, Sean is working with the, this guy who's been involved with these projects. So this is a real person. Then this is my friend I went to grad school with, James Ponsolt, and he had just, like I said, he had just, you can read all this, but he had just had a lot of success with his first few films. And so he came on board. And then this is my production company. This is my production company, which is me and my friend Mike, essentially, just the two of us. And then, hold on one second. Okay. And then this is just another producer. Terry Leonard is a producer in New York who I teamed up with. And then a producer, I teamed up with some producers out here in LA, Eric Lochner and Matt Miller. So those are my producers. I just talk about them. It's pretty self-explanatory. Here's like the investment opportunity. And so this is like more of the legal. And again, this is probably different in Russia, but you'll have something similar. What is important is how the investors are going to make their money back. And so there's this kind of this industry standard, at least in America, called the 120 50-50. So this idea that investors get 120% of their money back initially. So let's say you make a movie for $1 million and you have one investor give you a check for $1 million. They get the first 1.2 million back to themselves. So that's they make a profit. And then after that, every dollar that comes in after that 120, every dollar is split, 50 cents to them, 50 cents to you or the production entity. Now this is all negotiable, right? This is all negotiable. I've seen investors who have had really bad deals where they get maybe 110% and then nothing, not another dime. To me, any savvy investor, at least in the United States, who's invested in film will not take that deal. But I've also seen deals where investors take advantage of independent filmmakers because they don't know. So this is kind of a standard deal. And again, it might be different, but I want to share it with you. It's for you guys to look at. This is also a very American thing. There's in the United States, there's a tax incentive, so this won't apply to you all unless you're making a film in America. But there's all sorts of tax incentives. There are tax incentives to shoot your film in different states in America. So if you shoot a film in Louisiana or Georgia, in America, Georgia, you can get money back. You can get up to 30 or sometimes 35% of your budget back. So if you shoot a movie, like we shot in New York, actually, and I think I talk about this in the next thing. Not yet, but I'll talk about it towards the end. But we shot in New York and we got back $50,000 because we spent $300 in the state and they gave us $50,000 back, which we used that $50,000 to help with our post process, the editing and the delivery of the movie. So that was really very helpful. So tax credits, and again, it's probably different over there, but I want to run. So this is all kind of just crap. This is all kind of like, who knows? It's so hard to predict. And this is also so out of date now that, streamers have come in, but this was our best estimate. This is back when people were selling DVDs still and stuff. But this was our best estimate of how investors would get their money back. And I'll let you look at this. I won't go through it all, but you essentially want to give them three ranges. You want to say, listen, if the film performs how we assume it's going to perform, that's mid-range, and this is what you'll get back. So we'll spend 300, we'll make 450. We'll get back 750 on the three, and here's your return, and it's all there. If we overperform, here's the numbers, here's your rate, here's what you'll get back, and if we underperform, here's what you'll get back. So it's all it's just giving. Again, there's no way to say exactly what your movie's going to make, but if you can kind of assure investors like this is probably what we'll make. It's almost like that wish, want, walk thing I talked about. It's almost like three tiers, right? This is what we, hopefully in the best case scenario, this is what we make. This is probably what we'll make. And this is the minimum what we feel like we'll make. So I think that's important to let investors know if they're going to get their money back. A lot of times in independent film, they're not. Also for investors don't understand how films work. They don't understand like the smallest piece of the whole puzzle is actually production. I think most investors, when I told them that, they were like, oh, that, it seems like that'd be the biggest part. But no, I mean, the actual production, I mean, I think our shoot for Amira Sam was a 3-week shoot. We shot 95 pages in 16 and a half days, which is crazy. I don't know how I lived through that. It was too much, too short, but we did it. But so you'll have a prep period, which is usually a couple of months. Are there soft prep and hard prep, right? So soft prep can be years. So soft prep is developing the script and the idea. I mean, I just had a film come out, a film called Semper Fi that I wrote in 2005, and it was 14 and a half years until we got it made. So a lot of soft prep there. Hard prep, there's soft prep, then hard prep is after you've got the money, you've got the cast, and you're actually on location, you have an office. And hard prep is about 4 to 6 weeks usually. And then production is anywhere between 2 or 3 weeks on the really short end to, again, what's your budget, right? It could be 8 to 10 weeks if you have a ton of money. And then the post-production, you guys, I won't get into all that, you guys know what that's at. And then again, festivals are big for the independent film market, especially here in the States. And then you get a distribution, and then it comes out usually sometime that next year, in year 2. So this was a very helpful slide actually for investors. And then I talked about the distribution process, about getting a sales rep and all that, which you guys can look at. And again, it might vary, but hopefully this is helpful. And then you have to do some sort of marketplace analysis, like what's going on. And again, this is all changed. This is all changed since I made my movie, but you can look at how I sold it, to them. And then these ideas for cast. Martin did end up being our lead actor, Martin Starr. There's a TV show called Silicon Valley on HBO. If you watch Silicon, I don't know how that gets over there. But he's a character called Guilfoyle on that show. So he's been on a bunch of TV. He's been an actor. He's really great. I got him. My Amira is not here. I ended up casting a kind of an unknown actress who has since gone on to she's in a bunch of stuff now, and she's got 2 TV shows, and she's doing great. So that's really good. And then some other actors. The guy who played the uncle, a translator in my film, Laith Nackley, he was the lead in my thesis film. He was the lead actor in my thesis film, the 12-minute film that I used to get this made. And so, again, relationships. And then, here's the New York State tax incentive I talked about, right? This idea. So again, I don't know what tax incentives are. I don't want to get into it because they're different everywhere, but this was huge for us. This got us back about $50,000, which was very helpful. And then this is very important. Anytime you ask anybody for money, especially here in the States, you have to put in some sort of risk statement, which this whole statement basically says, you're going to lose your money, right? You're going to lose your money. Don't invest. You're going to lose your money because film is risky. So that's kind of the lawyers saying, listen, this is a very risky, you need to understand it's risky. And you can only raise money in America. You can only raise money from credited investors, although that has changed. And there is a website now called WeFunder, WeFunder, WeFunder.com. So I don't know if it's available globally. I know it's available here, but WeFunder allows anybody from around, anybody who's eligible, who can get to the account, I guess. And again, I don't know if it's only North American, but it allows them to invest in a film for as little as $100, which is really, which is new. And that's very new. And I've had some friends go through WeFunder. So I don't know what the accessibility is over in Russia, or if you're, planning on making a movie over here. But I would look into services like that. Okay, we've got about 7 to 10 minutes here. I'm going to share a couple more things. So this is my apologies if I'm talking very fast. I'm trying to, again, squeeze an entire year into 1 hour, but hopefully this is helpful to you all. I'm excited to take questions from you all. So we can get into that. I'm going to show you 2 more things before I stop. The next thing I'm going to show you is my friend James Ponsolt. I told you, my friend who I went to film school with, who was very successful. He after his, I think maybe second or third film, he was offered the opportunity to direct a movie that already had a script, already had a cast. They just needed a director. And so while this is not about your first feature, he did a pitch deck, and I always thought this was a really good pitch deck. So I believe I've shared this with you. And this movie is available. It's a really good film. It's called The Spectacular Now. It's set in an American high school, and I thought it was really well done, and it did very well. It played at Sundance, it won all these awards, and it did very well in America, this film. But I'm sharing with you, this is James. He shared with me, this is his pitch deck, and this is why, this is him going up. So again, this is not a first feature, so it's a little different from what I'm talking about. But what I like about it is it shows a director who has a personal connection to a story, and he pitched the studio why he should be the director, direct this movie. And well, there you go, why I should direct this film right there. So and so he goes through it, and it's very visual, and he ties the visuals, to 400 blows. First feature, by the way, great first feature, 400 blows. But he ties himself personally to the story, and he uses some really cool visuals. So and how he wants it. This is almost considered like what would be considered like a look book, right? And so a bunch of romances. It's a love story, so he talks about the visual approach. So again, I'm giving all this to you, so I don't need to go through it now. But I think this is really good. This was a really good pitch. I thought this was. You almost feel like after reading this, you almost feel like you've watched the film in a way, which I thought was really, really well done. So I'm sharing this with you all as a pitch deck. I think it's very effective and very well done by a very talented filmmaker. And the last thing I'm going to show you is another talented filmmaker, another one of the people who was on my list. I think he's on there. Is he in 2006? Brick, Ryan Johnson. Let me see. Oops, hold on a second. I think it was. Yes, Brick. Okay, great. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this film. This film, Brick. This was his first feature, right? And he made in order to get his film made. Hold on a second. I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to share something else. In order to get his, I think it was the second or third feature. He made a film called Looper, and Looper was about so he wrote the screenplay. Right, he wrote the script and he was sending it out, but in order to get people excited about the script, he created a little teaser video, and I'm going to show the video to you all right now. Hopefully, I'm going to show it to you. It's like a minute and a half, I think, or it's less than 2 minutes. But what I like about this approach is he took famous films. He took famous films that he did not have the rights for, and they call this a rip-o-matic because he ripped again, the English word. He ripped these movies. He ripped these scenes out from these movies, and he put them together with music and with voiceover, and then he created a trailer, essentially created a trailer for his screenplay, and it helped. Once the studio saw this, they gave him the money, and he directed the movie, and it's a pretty good action film. So I'm going to try to show this, and then I think after this we'll jump into questions. So let me pull this up. Yeah, it's a minute 39. Okay, great. Let me do share. Okay, hopefully this works. Please let me know if it does not. Okay. Okay.
Time travel has not been invented, but in 30 years it will be. It will be very illegal, used only by large criminal groups, my employers. When they need someone in the future to disappear, they grab him, zap him back in time to me. So he vanishes from the future, and I kill a man who does not yet exist. Assassins like me are called loopers. We shoot fish in a barrel. We are well paid. We live the good life while the world crumbles around us. And the only rule is, when the man appears, you pull the trigger. Easy. Until a man appeared who was me. I broke the rule. Now I'm a fugitive. I'm hunted. And there's only one way out. I'm gonna find myself. I'm gonna kill him.
Okay, all right, look at that, right at the hour. That was perfect. Accidentally perfect, which is, I guess, a good explanation of independent filmmaking, right? You know, things happen not always as planned, but sometimes they do. Okay, hopefully this was helpful. I went through a lot. I'm happy to talk about any and all of it. I've got 30, 45 minutes to talk, so let me know the best way to answer your questions. That is a great question. You know, unfortunately, I haven't read too many Russian screenplays. I haven't read any, if I'm being honest. In Russian especially. But I do teach at AFI, and I have a lot of international students, and we do every year. I feel like we have one or two Russian applicants and as students there, and so and we have a lot of European. I'd say of the class, I think we take about 28 directors a year, and I think usually half are international. And the European and Russian, filmmakers, they tend to have a different approach than Americans. They tend to, and again, it's hard to paint everything with a broad brush. Everybody is different. I've had one Russian student. His sensibility is a little bit more Western, or kind of Americanized with the stories he wants to tell. But I've also I had a Russian female who's a director who's super talented, and her stories were a little more diffuse, if that's the right word, a little more less structured, kind of classically as like the 3-act American structure, and a little looser, a little more character driven. Her work was. I think European cinema in general tends to focus more, and again, there's different levels of it, but the higher end European cinema tends to focus more on the kind of character driven art approach, whereas and again, this is very broad statements, but a lot of, especially Hollywood, where I'm at, is a lot of it, there's a real divide. There's the studio cartoon movies, whatever, comic book movies, whatever, Marvel things, there's those things, and then there's the more independent cinema underneath, a layer underneath that. And so there's a real divide. I don't know if this is the right answer to your question, but yes, I have noticed a difference, but that difference is a good thing. I don't think difference is a bad thing. I don't think you need to conform. You don't need to conform who you are as an artist to fit some other mold. I don't think that's ever the right solution. I think it's being aware of what different models of filmmaking are, and if you do fit into one of those models, that's great. If you don't, seek out. That's why I say watch all those first features. Try to find a director that you feel like could be your kind of guide, and go down that path. It would be my recommendation. I don't know. Is that a good answer? That is a good question. There's a lot going on there, right? Is the person alive or dead? Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, I see. All right. Well, if they're alive, it can be more tricky usually. And again, I don't know how laws work internationally, but if someone's dead, a lot of times, at least their personal story, once someone is dead, you can kind of, if it's in the public domain, you can tell their story. Now, music is difficult because you will need to get rights to the music. And so that's why so many, if it's a famous musician, if the musician's really famous, the music is very expensive. I don't know the best way to get that made. I mean, I think it might be difficult. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it might be difficult. If it's a less known musician, and if there's a way to approach the family or approach whoever has the rights and really sell them on you telling their story. I think that's usually the best way. As far as whether or not making it a musical versus making it more of a regular film, yeah, musicals can be expensive, but you'd be surprised. There are some musicals out there that are more low budget that work. And so, I would do more research there. So I don't know. My advice would be I don't think the difference between making it a musical or making it a regular non-musical film matters necessarily. I mean, the bigger issue is, can you get the rights to that music? Are you allowed to use that music in your film? Because if you're not allowed to use the music, then the whole thing falls apart. And it's difficult. Now you can still tell the story. You can tell the story about a musician without the music, but that's kind of hard to do. So, gosh, I don't know. That was a good question. There's no real answer. I would say try to, if the person's not, well, I don't know. I would say, try to get the rights to, if you can get the rights, that's great. I mean, also, if it's the type thing where if you don't have the rights, right? If you don't have the rights, but if you write a really great screenplay and you get it, and you get it to a good producer, and the producer can help negotiate a deal with the people who have the rights to the music, maybe it gets made. There's a very famous example of this with there was a movie about Freddie Mercury. What was it? Rocket Man. I think Rocket Man. I don't know if you guys saw it. It came out maybe a year or two ago. He was the lead singer in a band called Queen. And what? You guys? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. Anyways, that project. In order to get that film made, it took I think close to 20 years, and they actually had to get the other. Freddie Mercury is no longer living, so they had to get the other filmmakers or the other the other band members to sign on to it. So it was very complicated. So making a movie with music is very complicated. But that being said, you could still take a stab at it and take a chance if you feel like it's a story that needs to be told. And hopefully you can get the rights, and hopefully people will believe in you. If nobody else is trying to tell the story, you might be able to do it. That's a very good question. As a producer, if I'm reading a script as a producer, I need to need to be emotionally involved. And by emotionally, that means it could be drama, it could be comedy. It doesn't matter what that emotion is, but I need to be emotionally engaged in the characters and the world. So that's the number one thing. The second thing, from a practical standpoint, I need to see, are there actors that I can put in this that can help with the financing maybe and actually get the thing made? Are there, in other words, does the screenplay have roles that are so compelling that an actor who's done well or has some acclaim will sign on to the movie? So I think those are the two biggest things. One of my favorite quotes about just screenplays in general is the most important part of a screenplay is the first 10 pages, and the most important part of a movie are the last 10 minutes. I think that's pretty interesting. So I don't know, that's just a quote that I've heard a few times, and I think it's a really good quote. So those first 10 to 20 pages of your screenplay, I feel like, are so important, because I would say most screenplays that come to me, I only read until page 20 or 30. And then if I'm not, by page 30, if I'm not hooked into the story, I won't finish it. I just won't. It's not worth the rest of my time. It's not worth spending another hour of my life on. I'll just stop reading it. So making sure the first 30 pages of your script are so good and so engaging that I can't put it down. That is that's a good question. I'm, not, I haven't been doing that for a while, outside of where I teach. So it's tough. My only problem is I'd love to help, obviously. It's what I love to do. But if I start taking in, hundreds of films and in screenplays, it's just tough for me. It's really tough for me to handle. So I'd say, if the film is in a, I mean, and again, where is the film? Are you still editing it? Are you trying to finish it? Or it's something that's finished and it's out into the world? So, are you looking for feedback? There's two reasons you'd want to show it to somebody, right? For editorial, you know, notes to along the way, or okay, this is done, this has been out in the world, it's been getting some attention, and I just want you to see it, to see how I can help as a filmmaker. So unfortunately, I'm just worried about the timing of being able to look at too many things. So unfortunately, I'd maybe have to decline right now. But that being said, maybe at some point in the future I can make myself more available uh, to requests like that, because I would like to help out. I just it's tough. It's tough to spread myself so thin. The box office was not good. The box office was not good at all. But we sold it to Amazon, and we've sold it to, since then we've been making up our money. So, I mean, I think we got all the money. I don't know what the total numbers are. I mean, we ended up getting the money back, and I get little residuals, but it has not made from a financial standpoint, that film didn't do much for me financially. However, from a career standpoint, it did everything I needed it to do. It put a stamp. Actually, this is the post. This was our. There we go. If you can see the poster, this was our. That was the poster from our festival run. We had a festival. We had a festival poster, and then after we got bought by the film was bought by a big movie chain here in America called Alamo Drafthouse out of Texas, Austin, Texas. Anyways, after they bought the film, they put a new poster out and they changed the title slightly. And yeah, so financially, it was kind of a wash. It was kind of even. But professionally, it was a big help. I got signed. Again, we won all these festivals, so I could say I'm an award-winning filmmaker. And then I got signed by UTA, United Talent Agency, which is one of the big 4 agencies in Hollywood. And I got big agents who represent a bunch of stuff, and I've been working with them now for the past 5 or 6 years, and they've helped me put together various projects. So I think you raise a good point, because with your first feature, a lot of times, unfortunately, now sometimes they make a ton of money. There are some that go out and they just make a ton of money and they do really well. That's great. Obviously, that's kind of the goal for a lot of people. But another goal needs to be, taking your career to the next level. And that it's you kind of have a two-prong attack. And this is important for you to realize too, because when you're talking with investors, a lot of times your interests as a filmmaker are not aligned with the interests of the investor. Like, the investors want their money back. Depending on your relationship with the investors, you might or might not want the money back. You don't really care. You just want to make a great film that gets you noticed and recognized and put on lists to direct bigger movies, right? So those interests between the investors and the filmmakers, they don't always line up. Sometimes they're a little uneven. And so that's important to know as well. Like, I turned down the Netflix wanted to buy my movie, which as a filmmaker, Netflix would have been better for me, because Netflix had a much bigger reach than Amazon, especially at the time. Amazon was brand new. And but Amazon was offering more money, right? So Amazon offered more money, but less of a global reach. But Netflix was offering less money, but more reach. So as a filmmaker, I probably should have been more selfish and said, no, I want Netflix. I want more people to see my movie, and it to be I want it to have bigger distribution, but it was less money. So, but I respected my investors. I felt like I owed them. I respected them too much, and I wanted to work with them again. So I wanted to do the right thing. So I agreed, and we all agreed together that it was better to take more money with more limited distribution with Amazon instead of Netflix. So that was something that was an interesting calculation that I had to make, and I think I made the right call. It wasn't that much more money, but it was definitely more. Yeah, I don't. I mean, with I don't know. With short films, I feel like get into as many festivals as you can with short films. I feel like the biggest difference in this is my own advice too on festivals. With a feature film, you need to be pretty picky. With a feature film, I feel like you need to be um, a little more picky about where you have your premiere, especially because it can matter for distribution for a feature length film. But for a short film, I always tell my students, go where you're loved, right? Wherever, whoever wants to take you, get as many. It's more about the quantity. I mean, quality still matters. If you can get into Cannes or Venice or Rotterdam or some of these bigger festivals, internationally, you should do it. But as far as what American producers think, I think they respect. I think any good American producer will respect any top tier one festival around the world. And I think getting into Cannes is more impressive than getting into South by Southwest or even Sundance maybe. And I mean, Sundance is very popular. Toronto's the other big one. I would say Toronto's a big one as well. So I'd say get into the best ones you can get in. And I don't think to me, at the end of the day, it's how good is the short film, right? I mean, you can be a bad movie and get into Sundance, right? And it got in just because maybe it was about a subject matter that was, you know, popular or people wanted to see, but the movie itself isn't very good, right? So make a great movie. I think the most important thing is having a great film. A great film from any is the best way to put it. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but a great film from any festival is better than a middle mediocre film at a great festival. Does that make sense? Well, yeah. I mean, if you already have people who've agreed, you should put them in the presentation, obviously, because they're going to be in the movie. But you ask this is a very good question, and it's what I'm going through now with my second feature film. Is we have an actress attached, and she has some recognition, and now we're trying to find an actor. And I have a list of actors who I think are great, but they don't have as much name recognition as my producers, who they have a list of my producers have a list of actors who are maybe not right for the role. Like this one actor we were looking at he's like 10 years too old for the part. It's supposed to be 40 years old and he's in his early 50s. So you can finagle that. You can I don't know, you can manage that somewhat, but it's hard sometimes. So this is a great question. And this is a discussion for you and your producers, really. Who do you think you can get? You also don't want to put actors in there that are so huge, such big stars, Tom Cruise or Will Smith, or somebody you can't have, somebody who's definitely not going to do your first feature film. You don't want to put those in there because it's going to make you look naive and not kind of not educated, I guess, or not aware of the industry. So you don't want to put somebody so big there's no way to get to them. But you also don't want to have just your neighbor who who's never acted before. So it's tough. It's a tough question. I would say as a filmmaker, and this is again where there's two competing factions, right? As a filmmaker, you want the best actor. You want the best actor. You want the person who fits the role perfectly. Who, when you close your eyes and you think of the role, who is that actor who embodies that character? That's who you want as a director, usually, right? Now, does that character line up to who, is that actor, is that the same that your producers feel they can raise money with? Not always. If it is, that's great. If it's not, you have to talk to your producer and you have to have that discussion, and you have to make the call. And again, if it's in a presentation, if you're just saying these are the type of actors, maybe you could put in a few. If you're putting in 4 actors for the role, maybe two that are like maybe have a little more clout, a little more bigger career, and then maybe 2 that are more to the type, but maybe not as big a role. And then it's a conversation with your financiers, and if a studio is making the movie, it's a conversation with the studio. And then if you get your budget low enough, like with Amira Sam, I got mine so low for 350,000. I got it so low relatively in American filmmaking that my investors were like, yeah, I mean, you can kind of cast who you believe in. So I cast the 2. I was able to cast the 2 people who I thought were the best 2 people for the role, which was exciting for me. Ooh, how did I accurately Calculate revenue. Um, I looked at similar films. So basically, the best thing to do is find a film that's similar to yours in the similar genre. They're called comps, COMPS in America. The compare. It's short for comparables, comps. And so I would say find a comp a movie that is similar to yours that was released within the past 5 years, hopefully the past 2 or 3 years, and find a film like that and see what they did and then say, hey, my film is going to be similar. So that's kind of what we did. I found like basically for Amira and Sam, I found like 4 or 5 low budget, films that were made for less than $1 million, that had a small theatrical release, that were romances, kind of about characters on the fringe of society. And I found, I found 4 or 5 films like that, and I looked at what they made, and then I kind of just took my best estimate. There's no way to predict the future. So much of this is so much of filmmaking is execution dependent. So it's really hard. But you just have to make your best guess. And that's why I think it's important. I went through it in my presentation. It's important that you tell your investors, give them 3 different ranges. Say, hey, this is what we think we're going to make right in the middle. This, if we do really well, this is what we'll make, which is much more. And if we don't do as well as we think, this is the lowest amount that we possibly feel like we'll make. Giving them, I think investors will trust you a lot more if you go to them and say, hey, here are 3 possible scenarios for our film. As we expect, better than we expect, worse than we expect, right? Those 3, give them 3 scenarios. And I think any savvy investor, any investor who is smart will think you're smart. Will think, okay, this person is, they're not just saying it, because there's no way to go out and predict exactly, oh, this film is going to make, $874,000.26. Like, there's just no way to predict exactly what a film's going to make. Okay, sure. And if we go a little over, I'm fine. I'm happy to help out here. That's a great question. I'm sorry I did not mention that in presentation. I should have. If you're making a presentation, there's one big dividing line. If you're making a Rip-o-matic or a presentation and you're using material you don't have the rights for, you can do whatever you want. You can use any clip, you can use any song, anything, if you're not making money on it. So if you're not monetizing it, so you can't make a Rip-o-matic and then put it on YouTube and start getting revenue. You can't do that. That's illegal. Once you start making money on it, once you start monetizing it, it's illegal. But if it's just sending to investors, if it's just internal, if you're sending it to your team or to investors, at least in America, I've never ever run into any sort of legal issues. People understand that it's just you're using that as references, and because what can they come after if you're not making money? What can they sue you for, right? Like they can't come after you legally. So that's a good question, and but if you keep it internal to your team and to investors, you shouldn't run into any problems. But do not post it. I would not post it, out there. Now, that being said, that Rip-o-matic for Looper, I think it was on a Vimeo. I don't know where I got it. It might be online. So, I mean, but it's also that thing too, where that the Looper one was so successful and it became such a successful model that the people who own the rights to that music or those clips, they just let it go. They don't care. They're not going to pursue it because it was really well done in it. And in a weird way, maybe it helps their brand to be associated with it. So it's tricky. I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The thing I would worry most about is making a great Rip-o-matic. I would keep it short. I would keep it less than 2 minutes, again, short and sweet, just, get the story out. I mean, the Looper one does a really good job of setting up the premise. And then, I'm sorry I didn't have a subtitled version of it. I'm sure you can maybe find one online, or maybe you guys can get that one subtitled. But it's really well done. They do. I mean that, they do grow into feature length films. I mean, I don't know percentage wise how often, but it's definitely happened. The first feature film I produced was a movie called Allegiance, and it essentially the first 15 minutes of that feature length film was very, very similar to the short. They're almost identical actually. So it does happen sometimes. You know, if you feel like you have a great short that feels like a complete piece, I say that's a good route to go. Like I said this in my presentation, but I would be very careful not to try to take um, a feature film and crunch it down into a short. If anything, you start with a short, and the short is so good and the characters are so rich that then you expand the short. So I would much rather, I've seen more success with people starting with a great short and expanding that to a feature than less success of people taking a feature idea or a feature script and saying, trying to jam it into 10 to 15 minutes, and it just turns into a mess. So that's my advice there, if that makes sense. Yeah, this is a wonderful question as well. You're exactly right, because and the reason they don't look at unsolicited materials is because if you send a screenplay to a big studio, let's say you send a screenplay and it's about I don't know, a horse that is on the moon. I don't know, whatever. And they come out with a movie 2 years later about a horse on the moon. Uh, you will sue them. And even if they've been working on this horse on the moon movie, they've been working on this for 20 years before you sent your script, right? But you'll still sue them because you'll feel like, oh, I sent this and it's the same idea. So because of that, studios they legally cannot look at anything that's unsolicited, and that's the problem. It's a real problem. This is and this is what is changing in a good way. I mean, things are starting to open up a little bit more. There are different avenues in. I mean, so in order to get a studio to read a script, it has to go through either a lawyer or an agent. They need to submit the script. So and being in Russia, I'm sure, and trying to get, especially if you're trying to pitch like an American studio, it's just like, I don't even know, how you'd start that. So I would, recommend, that's why these film festivals are so important, because you can go there, even with a short film, get your short film into a festival, go there. You can get that. A lot of these, every festival has some sort of lab or some sort of feature, short to feature development thing where you can actually meet producers, and then these, producers with any sort of acclaim can get a script into a studio. So, I mean, I said lawyers or agents could get a script to a studio. A really good producer with a lot of clout can also, who's vouching for the script, can get it to it. So, I wish there was a better answer for you. I wish it's really hard. It's really hard to do. I would almost say you're best off working on your own, making a movie, getting it into festivals, getting a bit of a name for yourself, hopefully getting some sort of representation, whether that's an agent, a manager, or working with a producer, and then have them, work through their connections. Now, that being said, this is changing and things are being democratized in a very positive way, at least from my point of view. There's a very good website. I don't know if it's available over there. Have you heard of the Blacklist? Let me pull this up. Have you heard of the Blacklist? Hold on. I don't know if this is, let me put this in. So this is, I'm going to actually do a screen share real quick here. Can you guys see this? The Blacklist? Yeah. And so this allows producers to create an account, and then screenwriters to create an account to submit scripts, and the scripts go on and they get rated, and then producers can read them, and you can get matched with the producer. So I will share this URL with the chat. I don't know, I just put it in the chat. It says everyone. I don't know if that's everyone or, but I just put the website in the chat. But there are sites like that are really great. And again, I don't know if it's actually open to global. I'm assuming it's open globally. But I would look for opportunities out there where people are trying to get access. But and again, that's what festivals they can really help with that. But I wish I had a better answer for you. It's very frustrating, and the question you just asked is why it took me 7 years to get my first feature made, because nobody wanted to work with me. They didn't know who I was. And you can't really blame them. You need to make a name for yourself. I tell you know, all the times I'll get a question. I get this question a lot from my students that say, "Hey, what, how do I get an agent? When do I need an agent?" And I say, you don't need an agent until an agent needs you, right? You don't need an agent until an agent needs you. And what that means is you won't get an agent until they can make money off you, until you're already known. So I didn't get an agent until when I sold Amira Sam, when we had an offer come in from a distributor to buy the movie. When that offer came in, the agent said, "Oh, we'll take 10% of that. We'll take that. Thank you." And they started repping me then. But it wasn't until then that I got an agent. And so you need to prove your worth to them financially. That's a good question. So how much I don't think it's necessarily a direct connection. Usually it's not usually, it depends what award and it depends what festival, right? If it's a major festival, and it's a major award, one good case study to look at, I'm going to type in, there's a movie called Thunder Road. I typed the movie in there. Thunder Road was a short film by Jim Cummings is his name. He's the director. So Jim is a friend of mine. Jim made a really great 15-minute short film, kind of a character study that it won Best Short Film at Sundance. So it won Best Short Film. So as soon as it won Best Short Film, this is a perfect example of, like, he did not have a feature version, but he was like, I just won Best Short Film. I need to hustle. So right away, he wrote a feature version of Thunder Road, and he got money pretty quickly. And again, they only made it, I think they got $250,000. So even less than Amira Sam. So they didn't get a ton of money, but he made the feature version. And then that feature version won Best Feature Film at South by Southwest the next year. So then, oh, wow. Okay. Then people started taking note. And now he's directed a studio movie for MGM. He's got a couple other movies lined up, and now he's on his way. Right. But it all started from a short that turned into a feature. And if you're, I don't know if, social media or what but Jim is really great on Twitter and all that stuff. And he's very engaged in the independent film world. And he's a guy worth following. His production company, Vanishing Angle, produced my first feature. So I'm really close with those guys. But yeah, so if you win a big festival, there can be a direct relationship. But if you get an award at like a smaller festival, it's still good. It's still very helpful, but it might not pay off for years, because it just depends on how you're able to tie that into your feature project. And if you have a script ready to go, that's another piece of advice too, is if you have a really great short film that you think is going to do really well at festivals and it starts getting some awards, you'd be very smart to have a feature script ready. I think that's very good advice. That's a good question. Yeah. So the term we use for that in America is called an anthology series. Anthology is I think anthology. So there, so where each one is kind of a different. So each episode's a different take. Yeah. What Black Mirror was a popular one over here, right? There are some TV. I'm not as well, I'll be honest, I'm more in the feature film world. I don't do as much television, so I'm not as well versed in that. But yeah, they are popular. I think American Horror Stories, I think that was one. I don't know. Actually, I don't know that show at all, but I remember people talking about it. So they are popular. Anthology, I think they are popular. Whether or not they're going to conquer, the streamings, I don't know. That's a big word to use for that. I think they could be, if you have a good idea for one, and if it really works, and I think it's worth pitching and trying to get made. But I think right now is a very exciting time for streaming. There's a lot of streamers out there. There's more and more places to get your film. The problem is there's so much out there that it's hard to it's hard to market a movie. It's hard to break through because there's so many streaming services with both TV and film. And there's this new this limited series. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like limited series. So, you know, where you go in and it's almost like a hybrid between a feature film and a TV show where it's like maybe, 4 or 5 episodes, and it's just but that's it. So it's just one season, 4 or 5 episodes. That's becoming very popular over here. It's something I'm looking at doing possibly as well. Yes, that's a good question. So Netflix for my movie, what happened is once I had my distributor, I made my film, it played at a festival, it got a good review. That was also a very important thing. Is I got a great review from a film critic of my film. So with the review and with the film festival, my agents, the agents who were repping the film, they sent my film to probably 15 distributors, and of those, probably 15 or 20 distributors, of those distributors, um, 3 or 4 got back to us and said they were interested in buying it, and then we went back and forth, and then we picked the one distributor. Once we picked that distributor, which was again Draft House Films, the distributor then looked at all the outlets and they approached, they sent it over to Netflix and Amazon and everybody, and so Netflix will listen to distributors who have movies, right? Because it's been vetted, right? It's played, it's been a festival, it's been bought, so they will, distributors will, get you in the door there. So that's usually how they do it. I mean, as far as how does Netflix approach filmmakers now? I mean, they're doing less. Netflix is doing much less of the acquisitions and purchases, and they're doing much more of the internal creation of their own original stuff. So they don't, and the reason for that is they don't have to license it. If they don't have to pay a license fee to the film. So the problem they were running into is Netflix, when they first started, they were getting big movies that were really great, but they only got them for like maybe 2 or 3 year contract. And then when that contract was up, the people who own the rights to those movies, they really increased the price so much that Netflix, it didn't make sense for them to spend that much money. So they lost the movie on their service. And so because of that, Netflix pivoted about 5 or 6 years ago. And now I'd say, I mean, 80 to 90%, of their content is made in-house. And so again, how do you get to them? Through a manager, an agent, or a producer. Ideally somebody who has a relationship with them. So yeah. Yeah. Good. Absolutely. That was just a comment, not a question. Yeah. Good. That is a good. So they're looking for advisors to an animated show. Advisors. So like producers, like yeah. So I mean, the tricky thing is once you start involving writers, are they actually writing, and then does it become like a writing credit thing? Are they contributing as writers, or you'll either look, or you'll typically, again, my experience only, and I don't have that much animation experience. I have a little, but you either bring on like a producer to help kind of produce it and maybe give big level story ideas, or you bring on a writer to help actually write the script. So, I mean, where to start with that? Oh gosh, I don't know. I would say, I mean, target company, be specific, target company, a lot of animation companies, they will allow you to reach out to them directly, and you don't have to send over all your materials, but you can go on their website. So I would do the research on what type of companies you're looking to do. IMDb, is IMDb big over there? IMDb, like the Internet Movie Database. Okay, so I would go on it, and they have IMDb Pro, which is even better if you can do the Pro version, because the Pro version has all contact information. So I would go on IMDb Pro. I would find companies that are producing animation in the world, be realistic. I don't think I'd reach out to Disney, or Pixar. I wouldn't start there. I would maybe start a little lower, and I would go out and try to find companies that are operating in the space, and I would try to reach out to them, send them an email, try to give them a phone call, if you can get their contact information. And that's the best advice I can give, and hopefully that's helpful. Okay, well, thank you all. Thanks so much for having me. I hope this was. It's so strange not being able. There's people here, right? There's people out listening. It's not just me talking to myself. Hopefully, I think I can't see anybody. Well, I can see a couple of you guys now. So hopefully this was good. Thank you for having me.
Шон, большое спасибо за прекрасный мастер-класс. Это было интересно и познавательно. Вот, для тех, кто досмотрел этот мастер-класс до конца и рассматривает обучение в нашей школе кино и телевидения индустрии, мы подготовили вам подарок, как это было сказано ранее. А это скидка 10% на первый семестр по любой из программ весеннего набора этого года от нашей школы. Для бронирования скидки вам необходимо оформить заявку на нашем сайте с настоящего момента и до конца 21 марта включительно. Так что, как говорится, не откладывайте это на завтра, то, что можно сделать сегодня. Вот. Еще раз большое спасибо всем участникам мастер-класса. Будем рады видеть вас на других мастер-классах от нашей школы «Кино, телевидение, индустрия», который регулярно проходит в пятницу. Так что заходите на сайт, регистрируйтесь и добро пожаловать в индустрию. Всем спасибо большое.